as you're saying, this speech comes at a tricky time for President Emmanuel Macron. His popularity is dipping as he tries to push for reforms both in France and the EU. For some insight, let's speak to journalist Pierre Haski. Thank you for coming in to the studio. What we're seeing, this is a tradition for French presidents. How important is Ambassadors Week?
Well, it's very important this year, particularly as we have a new president, and it's the first time he has the opportunity to lay out completely and comprehensively his foreign policy. So I think this is a very expected speech by everybody. But the Ambassadors Week has become a tradition and a landmark because foreign policy is obviously not the priority in every country for the average people. And I think the Ambassadors Week is a way of bringing foreign policy, bringing the interests of France, bringing the economic links or cultural links we have with other nations a little bit closer to preoccupations of people. So it has become a moment of relating to foreign
more
policy.
And more important, putting it on a sort of global stage. You mentioned a lot of people anticipating this speech, 200 envoys in attendance. What are they looking to hear from the president?
They're waiting to have some clarification on several issues. Obviously, Europe is one of the core issues that the president will be addressing. And a few days ago, he had a big row with Poland at the end of his trip to Central and Eastern Europe. And that's obviously one of the words he's going to use about Poland and about his vision of Europe unification.
And Macron campaigned on being pro-European, but he's having these run-ins with some members in Central Eastern Europe. Has he made any progress in seeking this greater cohesion? He
has, because he just made this trip and he got the support on a watered-down reform of, there's the big controversy about these workers who are detached from Eastern and Central Europe and who are coming to work in France and other markets, but are paid with the social costs of their original country. And that's seen by French workers, by unions, by politicians here as unfair competition. And so Emmanuel Macron has campaigned on a protective Europe, and he wants to bring home the idea that Europe is not just figures and abstract bureaucracies in Brussels, but is also something useful and protective in everybody's lives. And so he has made this issue a key issue, and he needed the support of Eastern and Central Europe. But he is facing the opposition from Hungary and Poland, which are two very anti-Brussels countries in Eastern Europe. But he has made some inroads in getting the support of the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Austria. And so we'll see in a few weeks' time, but if he gets this reform through, which will bring some clarification and some protection to the French workers on this issue, he will be able to claim in front of the French public that he has made some progress. So that's a very important issue. The second one is his vision for the future of the European Union. We know he's waiting for the German elections later in September to clarify the situation and then make Franco-German proposals before the end of the year, kind of roadmap for the future of the European Union after almost a decade of stagnation. So these are really the key issues. But then you have obviously the Middle East. I think particularly Arab envoys will be waiting for clarification because the president has shifted French policy. He hasn't made Bashar al-Assad's downfall a priority or even a condition on a settlement in Syria, which was the attitude of the previous government. So that's really one issue on which we're going to wait to see how he presents the Syria policy. And obviously the third one is what happened yesterday in Paris, is the definition of a new approach to the migration issue. Yesterday in Paris you had a summit meeting with some sub-Saharan countries. The Prime Minister of Libya, one of the the competing governments of Libya and the southern European countries, Spain, Italy, the German Chancellor, and the French. And there is an attempt to find a new approach to the migration issue, which is raising, I must say, a lot of skepticism. But there again, we're going to wait to see how the president presents it.
Skepticism, a lot of attention domestically on this speech and internationally, as you were saying. We've seen his approval ratings here in France dip recently, but he came in with a lot of momentum. Internationally, are world leaders curious if Emmanuel Macron can deliver on his promises or not?
Yes, I think that he has raised a lot of expectation, both domestically and internationally, and his first steps on the international scene were quite spectacular. You will remember his welcoming Vladimir Putin in Versailles, and having some tough words in front of him at the press
Donald
conference.
Trump at Bastille Day.
Then you had Donald Trump. And so these raised his status on the international scene in a very, very fast mode originally. Today he is facing a double challenge. Domestically, obviously, a lot of things will happen this week. You know, on Thursday, the government is presenting their reform of the labor laws, and that's really a key issue in the program of Emmanuel Macron. And we'll see whether the unions will have a joint opposition to these laws, or whether the reformist unions will accept the reforms that are proposed. If Emmanuel Macron gets his reform through, I think he will have scored a lot domestically. Internationally, it's a different issue, and I think people are still waiting to see whether Macron can deliver. He has been a very forceful voice in his initial few weeks, but okay, that's posture, that's visibility. He has given himself a lot of visibility. Now, can it translate into actions, and particularly on the waking up of the European Union? That's another issue.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Haski, Pierre Haski.